What if you had 24 hours to live and you didn't even realize it? I have seen over 100,000 patients in my 20-year career in medicine, and after seeing so many patients, I can definitely say I saw a pattern that some apparently healthy individuals were coming in with hidden, life-threatening conditions, especially in patients who are middle-aged or older. And these aren't your classic heart attacks, strokes, or accidental traumas. These were even more insidious, devastating conditions that lead not only to death, but to life-changing injuries if you survive. And I came to the shocking realization that most of these deadly conditions actually could have been detected earlier. But because these are not widely known diseases, patients tend to ignore them until it's too late. I had to learn these lessons the hard way, and hopefully some of the lives I couldn't save will not have been lost in vain if I can share this life-saving information with you all. So here are 5 uncommon signs that you have a life-threatening emergency. Now, having these signs doesn't necessarily mean you're going to die in the next 24 hours, but could mean that you have an underlying life-threatening condition. And the last sign on this list is something really eerie and somewhat terrifying that is still difficult for me to explain to this day. So watch till the end. Number 1. Have you ever had some tummy pain and maybe a little constipation and thought nothing of it? Now, I've seen so many patients who complained only of stomach pain but ended up in emergency theatre, and some who unfortunately were too far gone for even surgery to help. Now, there are a lot of dangerous conditions that could cause severe pain in your stomach, like appendicitis, for example. But I think the deadliest I have seen is something called bowel ischemia. Just like any organ in your body, even your guts have a blood supply. They have arteries to supply it with blood, carrying oxygen and nutrients. Sometimes, if there is a blood clot in these arteries, the blood supply is blocked off, and that part of the gut starts to die. This can also happen if the bowel twists on itself, and just like a kink in a hosepipe, the blood flow is cut off. In both instances, the bowel becomes obstructed so that food won't move on, and if you try to eat anything, you'll just vomit it up. The pain is excruciating as your intestines are literally dying. If the process goes on long enough, the bowel will break open and leak poo into the sterile abdomen, causing something called peritonitis. This condition is horrible for the patient. It's so painful and devastating that not everyone will survive. All this can be identified early, especially if you're aware of the risk factors for this condition. These being, for example, being over the age of 60, having funny heart rhythms that affect the flow of blood and cause clots to form. These clots then travel from the heart all over the body and can block smaller arteries, like in the brain, causing a stroke, and in this case, the small arteries in the gut, essentially causing a stroke of your intestines. The diagnosis can be confirmed with something as simple as a CAT scan. The treatment is to have an operation where the dead part of the gut is cut out, and usually one end is left open on the skin to make something called a stoma. But usually patients are too sick and frail to survive this operation, as it is a major surgery and carries significant risk. This risk increases as time goes on, and especially if the bowel breaks open and leaks poo. Imagine all the nastiest bacteria that invade your otherwise sterile innards, causing a life-threatening infection. The tragic thing is, a lot of patients with risk factors for bowel ischemia tend to avoid coming in with stomach pain, unless it's unbearable, and then it's usually too late. So don't ignore worsening stomach pain, especially if you feel like you can't go to the toilet and you can't keep any food down either. Number 2, how many pillows do you need to go to sleep? Now, this might seem like a weird personal question, but the number of pillows you keep under your head could be a subtle sign of something going wrong with your heart. This is related to being breathless when lying flat, which is relieved by keeping your chest at an angle to your bed, and this is easily done by using more pillows. What does all this mean though? Well, it could mean your heart is at risk of failing or going into what's called acute congestive cardiac failure with pulmonary edema. Well, that's quite a mouthful, but what does that have to do with being breathless when lying down? If your heart is failing for any reason, especially the left ventricle of the heart that pumps oxygen-rich blood from your lungs to the rest of the body if this left ventricle is not doing its job due to your previous heart attack or any other reason. This means there's a back pressure of blood back to the lungs as the heart struggles to keep pumping that blood. The back pressure of blood in the lungs causes fluid from the blood to leak into the air spaces of the lungs. This interferes with the working of the lung and the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Essentially, you start drowning in your own fluid in a condition called pulmonary edema. One way to overcome this is to sit propped up so the fluid drifts to the bottom of the lungs and keeps some of the upper parts of the lungs fluid free. So this is why a lot of patients subconsciously start using more pillows when they sleep to relieve any feelings of breathlessness when they go to bed. And this is a good indicator that they may be having some silent heart disease, as a lot of people who suffer with this condition are not very mobile to begin with, so don't show the more classical signs of being out of breath when they exert themselves. So if you think you're piling on the pillows or you feel like you're getting increasingly out of breath, make sure you get yourself checked out. And the best test for assessing cardiac function at this stage would be an echocardiogram. Again, I see a lot of patients with newly diagnosed heart failure report these subtle changes months before an attack, but were unaware of the significance. Number 3, have you had any episodes where you were slurring your speech or suddenly started to see double? I found these symptoms are frequently ignored by patients until it's too late. A lot of people just put it down to being tired or just another sign of getting old. Any new and sudden change in speech, including the inability to even just express oneself or to communicate, could be a sign of a stroke. I found that a lot of people associate a stroke with weakness or floppiness of one side of the body. More subtle signs like speech changes or sudden changes in your eyesight or vision tend to get ignored. Now, if you don't know what a stroke is, it's when part of the brain dies because of a disturbance in the blood flow to that part of the brain. You have 2 types of strokes. One where the blood flow is blocked due to a clot in the blood vessel. This is called an ischemic stroke. The other type occurs if there's bleeding from one or more of the arteries in the brain, and it's called a hemorrhagic stroke. And this type of stroke tends to be more deadly. I've seen quite a number of patients who end up ignoring changes in speech or blurring of vision, thinking it's some temporary illness, and don't come into the ER until it's very late. The sooner you come in, the quicker you can get life-saving treatment like clot busters for ischemic strokes, and in the case of hemorrhagic stroke, which are usually due to uncontrolled high blood pressure, we can get you on medication to get your blood pressure down safely. And in some cases, you might need procedures to clot off the bleeding vessel, something called coiling. I've seen quite a few patients who all had slurring of speech for a few days, but went unconscious, and when they came in and we scanned their heads in the CT scanner, we found a catastrophic bleed in the brain with no chance of survival. So don't ignore any new sudden changes in speech, communication, or vision. Number 4, almost everyone knows if you have pain in the left side of your chest that it could be a sign of a heart attack. But did you know you can have a heart attack with no chest pain at all? And this is a case I've seen thousands of times, especially if you are a diabetic. If you feel suddenly short of breath, have an attack of sweating, and feel nauseous and maybe even vomit, if ignored, you could go into a cardiac arrest, and this could be fatal. I see so many diabetic patients coming in with pretty bad heart attacks, but never had any chest pains, just feelings of nausea, sweating, and being out of breath. Number 5. Now, the last condition on my list is not a single condition, but it's something that is extremely distressing to witness. I can't count the number of times I've had a patient in the ER tell me, "Doc, I feel like I'm going to die." And the look on his face is just terrifying. And I have heard so many variations like, "I'm going to die, something awful is happening," etc. Now, this is what's been described as a sense of impending doom, and it's not specific to any single disease. It's commonly seen in patients having a heart attack, but I've seen in patients who are about to go into cardiac arrest for any number of reasons, even patients like who have had septic shock. It's as if your body is telling you you're going to die. I've gotten somewhat used to seeing it in the elderly and frail, but when I see it in relatively young patients in their 40s or 50s, it's very distressing. So if you feel like you might be dying, even if you have nothing else specific like chest pain, headache, or difficulty breathing, chances are you might have hours or maybe minutes, so get medical help right away. So those are 5 signs of critical illness that in my experience I have found a lot of people ignore until it's too late. If you found the information useful, please let me know. And up on the screen are some other videos you might find life-saving. So stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next one.